All right, today we're going to be breaking down what all of these legal actions mean for the future of crypto. And I do mean the future of crypto. What we are about to face here in the United States, some of you, of course, abroad, you don't necessarily see the same kind of things playing out, but we are in an absolute warfare with what's happening around the crypto and digital assets market. So we wanted to get our expert on to talk about this because you've got Binance, Coinbase, and a lot of other things happening. We're going to break all this down for you guys today. It's a big one, so stay tuned right here. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Tech Path. Joining me today, of course, is James Murphy, who is, you know him as MetaLawMan out there on Twitter. Great to have you back in, James.
Great to be with you, Paul. It's an exciting time.
Exciting is I guess that's one word for it. It's crazy, it feels like. We've got so many things happening right now from a regulatory front, from a litigation front. Obviously, you as a former SEC or securities attorney, you're getting a chance to see some things that my question to you, we talked about this in the pre-show. Have you ever seen anything like this before in the markets? I mean, one industry seemingly targeted and looking like they're taking assaults from just all ends. Anything like this before?
I have not, Paul. I mean, this was understood to be a legal business, and
Yeah.
the SEC looks like they want to run the crypto business out of the United States, and with it, a lot of interesting innovation, a lot of brilliant people, a lot of
Yeah.
capital, and the reputation of the United States for being a land of opportunity and where a lot of game-changing innovation for the world started. And so it's troubling for sure.
Yeah, we're going to get into that because I think the sovereign nation of the US here, when you think about the future of its citizens, part of this is going to have the freedom to invest in things. And this is going to be a big factor that's going to go forward. We'll break that down. But yesterday, of course, the Hinman documents released. After going through those and seeing what most people have reported so far, what is going, if anything, what is going to come of these documents, and does this help Ripple's case at large?
I think it does help Ripple. For your viewers, I would commend to them uh, the uh, the clip that Stuart Alderati, the general counsel of Ripple, put together, kind of walking through all of those
Hmm.
documents. I thought
Yep.
that was well done. But quite surprising, I guess naively, I thought there had been a consensus that developed at the SEC that it would be a good idea for Bill Hinman to say that Ethereum is not a security. Well, it turns
Yeah.
out there was no such consensus at all. And it was really Bill Hinman's idea, and he was the driving force behind making that happen. And he went ahead and did it with opposition from the Division of Trading and Markets, which are pretty much experts
Hmm.
in the subject of securities trading, and the General Counsel's Office of the SEC, which are very, very sharp lawyers whose role it is to analyze internal legal issues and judgment calls under the law for the SEC, and they
Hmm.
all were not in favor. They didn't, veto it. They were very polite in raising questions, but I was surprised that it was really Bill Hinman himself that was the driving force to make that happen. And then he articulated a couple of new factors that he said the SEC considers in determining whether a digital asset is a security. And then
Right.
again, the Division of Trading Markets and the General Counsel came back with, well, Bill, this is not anywhere in the Howey test. We're not sure that this is such a great idea. Why don't you talk about factors in the Howey test instead? He did not, and went forward with what he wanted to go forward with. Now,
Yeah.
interestingly, shortly thereafter, Jay Clayton endorsed that speech. So
Hmm.
I think there's a good argument that, for better or worse, that is the policy of the SEC.
Yeah. Interesting stuff for sure. Could this be used against Gensler in any way, based on what we know now?
Yeah, I think you see in all of these cases the point being made by the defense lawyers that there was uncertainty when any particular token was issued. And certainly as it is traded on a secondary market, there was uncertainty as to whether any particular token qualified as a security. And that is confirmed by this look we get into the building at the SEC, where there
Right.
is a lot of uncertainty. And, one of the players on this feedback on the Hinman draft speech said, hey, Bill, don't say it, Ethereum's not a security. We want flexibility to take a different position maybe some other time later on Ethereum. Now, this is crazy. We're supposed to live in a world of a rule of law, not, agency personnel making the
Yeah.
decisions about significant issues like what's a security, and then changing their position later. So I think it's very helpful. And finally, on this, Paul, what was an interesting comment was, I think the Trading and Markets said, Bill, if you give this speech, there's going to be more confusion than
Right.
exists right now, acknowledging that there was confusion right then, and that if he gave the speech, there would be more, not less. And so this was supposed to be guidance, but in the view of the personnel at the SEC itself, this guidance added to the confusion.
Yeah, and I think that was the case that Brad Garlinghouse was making, is that these kind of bombshell issues would only add fuel to the fire of the confusion that was already at play when Ripple was charged for their actions. So it's a very interesting turn of events going forward. Again, all of this will depend on whether or not we see this, through Judge Torres or the actual litigation coming to fruit on where Ripple will be. There's some other things. And you want to add to that?
Yeah, just your point on Garlinghouse. When you put the chronology of this together, it's quite remarkable. The speech was in June of 2018. Garlinghouse went in 2 months later to talk with Jay Clayton and some other people, the top, the chairman and some other people. And he just heard, wow, Ethereum's just gotten the all clear sign.
Yeah, we're good to
from
go.
Hinman. I'd like to talk to you guys about the status of XRP, and just let's have a discussion about it. And Jay Clayton shut it down immediately. Then they wrote a memo about it confirming. Jay Clayton shut it down and refused to have that discussion with Brad Garlinghouse so that the uncertainty would continue. I think this is helpful to the Ripple argument.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it does look like there's nefarious actions at bay here. So very interesting position. Of course, obviously, one of the reasons the SEC fought so hard to not release the Hinman emails. Let's get into the next topic, and this is the SEC versus Binance US. Now, obviously, there's a lot happening right now within this case, and it's getting more heated and more heated. I was looking at your tweet right here. Sounds like the hearing versus SEC versus Binance went even worse for the SEC than I had heard. Break this down, because there's a little bit here, but I want to read between the lines in your opinion on where you think this hearing went.
Well, the SEC filed papers to get something called a temporary restraining order, which is an extraordinary remedy at the very beginning of the case. That is used when there's really compelling evidence of fraud and that the defendants are bad people who are going to take assets and run, really.
Right.
And so they tried to paint the very worst picture they possibly could of Binance, CZ, and Binance US. Well, Binance hired some really, really good lawyers, some of the very best in the country. And one I mentioned, Bill McLucas, is a legend, in our business of securities law. He was the director of enforcement at the SEC for 8 years, the longest serving director of enforcement ever. A lot of people were mentored by Bill and look up to him. A lot of people I hired and worked with, my partners. Anyway, they made a very compelling argument with affidavits of the chief accountant of the SEC saying there's no evidence here of any emergency. or any movement of US customer assets overseas like the SEC is claiming. And this
Right.
was the critical, pivotal issue, Paul. Were assets of US customers disappearing? Because if the answer was yes, why then you have an FTX scenario
Sure.
and it would make sense to enter a TRO. So we get to the hearing yesterday, and the judge has a very simple question for the SEC. Do you have evidence that US customer assets are being moved overseas into the control of Binance and CZ? And they couldn't answer. And she asked specifically every single SEC lawyer that was appearing before her. I don't know how many it was, but there were a few. None of them could answer. She became very frustrated and concluded that there really isn't any emergency here, and sent the parties back to try to negotiate an agreed order that will allow Binance US to continue in
Operate.
operation,
Yeah.
not kill it on the spot, and protect customer assets, which was a reasonable and rational thing for her to do. But I can tell you, she asked some really, really hard questions of SEC lawyers, and they did not have good answers.
This is interesting to me from the SEC standpoint, is the on-chain forensics that is available within blockchain. You would think that they have the capability of being able to monitor this situation all the way down to every block, every wallet that's coming out of Binance, globally, as
Right.
well as what's happening in Binance US. So is this normal, though, activity from a government agency to issue these somewhat frivolous attempts to try to thwart a business from operating? Have you seen this happen before? I mean, you said it's usually because there's nefarious actors and there's people that are doing things that might not, that usually they have evidence for. Is this like a normal thing that they just throw out these kinds of, injunctions?
It is normal operating procedure in a scenario where you've got a money manager who's going to take off to, you name it, another country, and you kind of have them dead to rights. That
Yeah.
they've been running a Ponzi scheme. They refuse to engage with the SEC. And generally, you also have criminal authorities kind of activating at about the same time against that kind of entity. But in this scenario, they were taking on a very large company with Binance that was very, very well funded with very good lawyers who have credibility in that
Right.
court. They're well known in that court, and they're saying, Judge, we have affidavits saying this is not true. So yes, the SEC does go in for TROs and has been successful many times, but this is an unusual scenario to try to do that. And what they were trying to do is kill that company, Binance
Right.
US, at the outset, so they could not defend themselves. Because remember, Paul, they wanted to freeze all of the assets of Binance US,
including customers.
That means can't pay your employees, can't pay your rent, can't pay taxes, can't pay anything. That means you're out of business on the spot.
Yeah. I was looking at the article you referenced over on CoinDesk. This was where the judge kind of hammered the SEC attorneys about their motion to freeze the assets, mainly because it was, back to your point, there was no proof of being able to kind of get to this point. And then further in the article, Binance. Now, this is interesting too. Let me zoom in on that a little bit. Representatives of Binance said they mainly want to be allowed to do normal operating expenses, and they're not willing to accept the death penalty, so to speak, represented by a total asset freeze, to your point. So right now, what's happening between Binance and the SEC? Are they negotiating this out to say, this is what we'll do this while we're going in through litigation? We want to keep the exchange operational. What's happening?
So this is pretty typical, that the judge does not actually want to enter an order that one party opposes, because they could appeal, and it would be an emergency appeal to the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. She really wants an agreed order. And so she ordered the parties to go meet with the magistrate judge who helps people mediate disputes. And the judge pointed out, you all aren't that far apart. this should be able to bridge this because honestly, the Binance side offered about 90% of the relief that the SEC asked for in the beginning. And so she's asked them or ordered them to meet with the magistrate judge to hammer this out. She wants them to come back tomorrow with a stipulated order or a really, really good explanation for why they could not agree. And then I would expect she's going to do something either tomorrow or Friday in terms of entering an order.
All right. I mean, this is important, obviously, because a lot of our viewers and listeners on the podcast, et cetera, they're Binance US customers. I myself am a Binance US customer. So you have a lot of people who might have funds in there. They're starting to wonder what's going on. And it might be their only place to do any kind of exchange trading, whether you're buying Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever it might be. So it's a very critical scenario. Now, I want to jump over to this to me is the juiciest part of this whole issue with Binance. And it goes back to a tweet you mentioned. Right here, it says, I would suggest that Gary Gensler block some time on his calendar to sit for depositions for the next decade. So you think this is something that is really going to expose Gensler over a long period of time, and this is going to hurt his political career if he has to do these kind of things. Explain this.
Yeah. So Gensler was very involved in the digital asset conversation before he became the chairman of the SEC.
Right.
And I think as more is revealed, we're going to learn more about his role. But right now we have two things. Number one, he's on video advocating for Algorand and saying what a brilliant person his colleague is there at MIT, who was the founder of Algorand. And shortly after he gave the speech on video, Algorand issued its algo token. And so what he knew, at the time in advocating this to people who could very well be potential investors in that algo token is going to be relevant if he had all of the facts about what was happening there and didn't say to anybody, oh, and by the way, stay away from the algo token, because of course it's an unregistered security. That's a problem for him because it points up the fact that, to give him his due, he didn't know that. He didn't think it was an unregistered security, and nobody else did. Market participants did not believe what was about to happen was a massive illegal issuance of an unregistered security called algo. So his information is relevant. The bigger one, however, is his role with Binance and CZ in particular. And this is interesting how it came to light, Paul. This was inaccurately reported in some places that Binance's lawyers had come into court and argued that Gary Gensler had this serious conflict of interest because of his interaction with CZ. That's not what happened. What happened was the SEC filed for the TRO and attached a lot of documents to its brief. And in those documents was a letter from Binance's lawyers to the SEC saying, you know what, we haven't heard anything back from you from our suggestion that Gary Gensler must recuse himself from any consideration of this case. You haven't responded. And that letter was marked confidential and FOIA confidential treatment requested. The SEC revealed the letter and filed it publicly in court. It doesn't help them, so I don't know why they did that. But in that letter, the lawyers for Binance point out that Gary Gensler talked not just with CZ, but other senior executives at Binance International, Binance.com, about their business operations, about their intent to issue the BNB exchange token, about their intention to roll out a U.S. exchange called Binance US, and about Gary Gensler's interest in serving as a advisor to Binance. And this is what I mean by that. I've never seen this level of a chairman being mixed up in the facts of a case that they bring. in enforcement. I've never seen it like this. And that letter concludes, therefore, for these reasons, Gary Gensler is a material witness in this case, which means they're definitely going to try to get his deposition and call him as a witness in trial and get his documents, just like the Hinman documents.
Wow. All right. So, man, there's so much here on just that, because this could get into a scenario. My question to you, first of all, let's go back to the Algorand thing, because I want to retrace that for a second here. Gensler mentions this, and at the time, maybe he's saying, I'm just going to take devil's advocate, from a court position here. At the time, he did think that it was not, or could not assume that it was a security, and made those kind of statements. Versus now, what he's saying is, yes, Algorand is a security. I was just looking at a tweet right here coming in with all the list of tokens that have been listed by the SEC that contends are securities. And of course, right about midway down, you see Algorand right there on the list. So with that being the case, could facts have changed to be able to give him an out, first of all, on that, based on his assessment prior to that, where he was talking about Sylvia McCauley and Algorand, a Turing Award winner, MIT professor, etc. Could facts have changed and get him out of this? How would that play out?
That's possible, but get him out of it in terms of being a witness, I don't think so.
Okay.
He can say, it wasn't going to be an unregistered security at the time I was talking about it. I don't know of any such changed circumstances. But it's possible, but that doesn't get him out of being a witness. And so he needs to look forward to that. And it's sort of surprising, when you're talking about exchanges that are trading over 100 tokens, why pick one that the chairman's all mixed up in? That's fascinating.
Yeah. Okay. So another question here is kind of looking at this case lining up against CZ and Binance in general. Could this, in fact, get Gensler in the hot seat? Because it's going to be difficult to displace him as the chair before maybe the next administration. So could we see him get in the hot seat, get into so much water that there's just a political scenario that it's starting to look bad on the administration, and they actually change the structure of how the SEC is done? Could that happen within our timeline between now and the next admin?
It's possible. I don't think it's likely. I think he's got a lot of political cover. I think Senator Warren really likes him. So what's interesting here, Paul, is the Binance people asked Gensler to recuse himself. Now, remember, there are 5 commissioners at the SEC. We don't know what the votes were on authorizing these 2 cases against Coinbase and Binance. But if, hypothetically, Chairman Peirce and Ueda voted no, then Gary Gensler was the deciding vote. You got to have 3 votes to authorize an action. And if he should have recused himself, but instead was the deciding vote to authorize an action of this magnitude against Binance, and they come up with a bunch of emails and notes and texts, whatever, of his relationship with CZ, it could get a little hairy.
Yeah, I was just looking at all the chairs there. Obviously, Hester Pierce, we've talked about here on the show quite a bit, and then Ueda, which is involved in this. So to your point, yes, that's a very interesting. So legally, I mean, if anything, it just gets really messy and dirty for Gensler as we start to trace through all of the Binance scenarios coming within this. I want to jump over to the scenario of, and I guess before I jump over to Coinbase, I want to ask this last question. So you feel like he could be deposed during this case that is now in action with Binance?
I do, and here's why. In the letter, the Binance lawyers say they had discussions with Gensler about BNB token. The BNB token. The BNB token is front and center in this case, in the complaint. And so if they've got notes or people have recollections saying, This gentleman expressed the view that the way they were doing the issuance would not be the issuance of a security. Remember, it's not private citizen Gary Gensler. This is a guy who is the head of the CFTC. The issue of what's a commodity and what's a security didn't just cross his desk when he became the chairman of the SEC in April of 2021. He's dealt with it for years. And so his opinion on that issue would carry some weight with anybody. And so I don't know what they have. All they say is these discussions happened. What he said, what people remember, what's documented, we don't know. But yes, I would push very hard for his deposition. And when they call him a material witness, they couldn't provide a clearer signal. That's their intention.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's jump over to the Coinbase topic, because this is another one that I want to dive into. Before we get started, though, I want you to listen to this clip right here on Kevin O'Leary talking about Coinbase. Listen in.
And so while it's been great to be part of this wonderful nascent community and cheering on this idea of a rogue nation of crypto trading, it's worthless, because the asset class is a nothing burger today, and it will remain so until we resolve this issue. It's now crystal clear what Gensler wants. He is calling it a broker-dealer exchange, period. There's no grayness. Now, if I'm on the board of Coinbase, or I'm a shareholder, which I'm not, and I certainly have almost taken all of our capital out of there, I have zero interest as an institutional investor in putting 1 cent into an exchange, a service, a centralized wallet that is at war with the regulator I serve every day. Okay, worst case, hear me out on this. Let's agree Bitcoin is a security. What's so wrong with that? Why not agree to that and then have $1 trillion come into the market once you've had that agreement? I'm okay with whacking Brian, he's a great guy, putting someone else in there.
He's a great guy. We can get rid of him, but he's a great guy.
He's a pioneer, but if he worked for me, I'd fire him. I don't want to go to war with Gensler. That's a really bad outcome for me. They've decimated their stock, they've decimated their market cap, and they want to do it again? I mean, that's just insane. I mean, this story is getting boring. It's getting boring. Hey, let's fight the Securities and Exchange Commission one more time. Sure. What a stupid idea. It's over. It's so over, it's almost getting boring. Gensler has told him countless times, no, 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 and no. Read Gensler's lips. The answer is no.
All right, so we clipped a couple of links there together. And as you can see, I mean, this is a pretty broad statement from O'Leary. I mean, can Coinbase afford to take the SEC on with these kind of statements as it is right now? What's your current situation on this?
Well, first of all, Kevin O'Leary has a little bit of a credibility problem in the sense that he was a big crypto proponent when he was being paid millions of dollars by Sam Bankman-Fried. So now he's not being paid to promote it, and he's turned negative on it. Coinbase has limited options here. If they were to register as a securities exchange, the first thing they would have to do is delist all of their tokens, except for Bitcoin and maybe Ethereum. And therefore, there is no business there. There's not enough trading to support the business. In the view of the SEC, these tokens are not just securities, they are unregistered securities. In the view of the SEC, it is illegal to serve as a platform for the trading of unregistered securities. So O'Leary doesn't know what he's talking about. There is no way to comply. This is what the executives there at Coinbase have been saying. Unlike other areas of the world, like the European Union, with their regulatory framework under MiCA, you can have a crypto trading platform that is complying with the law. And what we found is when an EU or an individual country comes up with a framework, what happens is there is a stampede of exchanges that line up to sign up for that regulation with the intent of complying to the letter with some very, stringent requirements around custody of customer assets, segregation, accounting, separation of functions within an organization. All of these things exist in other places in the world, just not in the United States. So O'Leary is misinformed. You can't do that in the United States. You cannot, as Coinbase, go sign up and continue to trade Algorand. Can't happen.
Right.
You have to delist everything and not have a business. So they must fight. There's no option here if they want to have this business. And if Americans want to be able to trade tokens other than Bitcoin, they better root for some of these exchanges to succeed in court, or it will be gone.
Yeah, this gets to the point that we talk a lot about here on the show, and that is just the freedoms of Americans and being able to do these kind of things. Now we're starting to see the number of nations and regions within the globe that have started to basically embrace this new technology, innovation, and eventually at least a framework. Back to your point, once the framework is in place, if one gets in place, then you have basically an influx of all these companies and new innovation begins because now there is a framework going forward. So I think this is the big struggle right now. Do you feel like this will be kind of one of the talking points for the next candidates going into the presidential election? But even more importantly, even in Congress and within the traditional Senate, et cetera, how do you think all this plays out from a standpoint of the political aspect of this?
Well, we're already seeing it. My suspicion is there must have been some polling work done because 2 or 3 weeks ago, we saw on the same day this new term, crypto bro, being used by Senator Warren, Congressman Sherman, and the President of the United States, all on the same day to attack this concept of anybody who's interested in allocating to the crypto asset class. They're bad. And apparently that's supposed to be a vote getter and a campaign, money getter. And so we will see, I think the crypto community plans on mobilizing for 2024 to defend itself. And in terms of the policy, I don't honestly get it. I fully understand why Senator Warren would conclude, you know what? I don't want to invest in crypto. Secondly, you know what? I think people should be informed of the risks of crypto and encouraged not to invest in crypto. But to make the jump to, I think we should do everything possible to make it illegal for anyone to decide for themselves to allocate some of their assets to crypto, I think it's un-American, in my opinion.
No doubt.
I don't agree with that. I don't recommend that my mother invest in crypto. I don't recommend that anybody invest in crypto unless, they've got, assets that they're prepared to lose and they allocate a small part of their net worth. This is not financial advice, obviously. But I disagree with the policy posture of let's make it illegal when it's legal in all these other countries to do this. The result is you lose innovative minds of young people. You lose capital. You lose opportunity to these other countries, and they're gloating. They're laughing at the EU, the UK, Hong Kong, Singapore. They're like this, Dubai. They're just thrilled that the United States has taken themselves off the field.
Yeah, I think you have two presidential candidates right now that are in the race. You've got RFK, who has come out. He was at the Bitcoin conference here in Miami. He's come out obviously pro more freedoms, from that aspect. Then you have the governor of Florida right here where we are with Ron DeSantis, who's also been very I won't say pro crypto, but pro digital assets and technology moving forward. So obviously here in the state of Florida, he's passed a bill here recently that's going to basically try to deter CBDCs, et cetera. So he's very he's a very freedom-oriented candidate as well. So I think we have it both on the Democratic side and on the Republican side going into these presidential campaigns. Unlikely that we'll get any kind of debates going forward, but this is going to get very, very interesting in the coming months ahead of all of this. Okay, so I want to within Coinbase. I mean, what would you say right now? You being a securities attorney, you've been in this business for a long time. You've seen it. Probably seen other cases similar to this. What would you give them on a likelihood of marking a win on this against the SEC?
Well, I think what they're going to do is file a motion to dismiss early in this case, saying that if you take everything in the complaint as true, we still win because we don't trade securities on our platform. And so it's going to be, get a judge to take a good, hard, long look at do tokens traded in the secondary market qualify as securities under Howey? And I don't think they do. And the reason I don't think they do is when you buy a token on Coinbase or any other market, you are not acquiring an interest in the underlying project. You're not investing in
owning a stock.
Algorand.
Exactly.
If you buy an algo, you don't participate in the profits generated, if any, by an underlying project of Cardano or Solana or whatever. And so it's clear to me, it just does not qualify under Howey. And so, I think their chances improve as they go up the chain in appeals, unfortunately, because there's another argument, which is the SEC simply has no authority at all over crypto exchanges, because this is a major question that must be answered by Congress. And the Supreme Court of the United States has gotten really, really clear on this recently, that an executive agency cannot start regulating in a new field without a clear statement from Congress that they have that authority. Exactly. And here we have, just 2 years ago, Chairman Gensler in May of 2021 testified in Congress. This wasn't an interview, with CNBC or at a conference. This was testimony. Testimony is prepared and vetted before a chairman goes before Congress. And he said, the SEC does not have legal authority now to regulate crypto exchanges. I, the chairman, believe that it would be good if Congress would grant us that authority over crypto exchanges, but to date, they have not. And so he was right then. He's done a 180-degree pivot and now says he has all the authority he needs. And I don't think the Supreme Court of the United States is going to agree with that. I'm not going to put a number on it, but if you read the decisions of the Supreme Court, they are not big fans of executive agencies getting into new areas that are very significant in our economy and just deciding on a new set of rules, and that they have the authority to do it.
Yeah, I think you summed it up right there. I want to go to one last clip. I know we're taking a lot of time, but I want to get this one last clip in, and because I think it makes a very good point here.
Hucksters, fraudsters, scam artists, Ponzi schemes.
Hucksters, scam artists. I mean, it's like that scene in Woody Allen's Bananas where the cop gets up onto the witness stand and says, he's a New York commie intellectual bad apple, but I don't want to cast no aspersions or nothing. What do you make of his comments here?
Weak regulators spread fear, and strong regulators spread opportunity. And I think we've got a real problem because the SEC has been spreading fear, and all of the innovators are leaving the country. And there's a huge problem we have. I mean, he is damaging our country if he's going to do this sort of thing.
Now, Kevin O'Leary.
Coinbase, all they wanted to do was abide by the law. They kept writing the SEC. What can we do here? What can we do here? And I think our regulators are acting way out of line. and I think it's time to rein them in.
Venture capitalists, you are the risk takers. You're the real capitalists out there who give money when you see opportunity. You have often told me over the years, you say, you know what, when I give money to a startup company, I almost kiss it goodbye because you just never know what's going to do well.
You've got to set your people free. I don't understand why we have this, we're even allowing this sort of like, you must do this kind of government. That's a very ugly, it's ugly, it scares me. I've lived my life here in America, and I'm starting to see other countries look more attractive.
All right, I'm going to pause that one there. I think that hits it home right there, James, on exactly what you're saying is flight of innovation, countries now starting to rise into maybe the whole aspect of the future of where digital is going. I still have a position that the United States is one of the most critical cogs in the wheel of blockchain technology and crypto as a whole, because it needs it, to really accelerate to the level that we need it to, from investment class, much like when you had the birth of the internet. The growth of what we saw out of that was just amazing. All the companies that you invest in today on Wall Street came out of that birth period, which was in the early 1990s and mid 2000s. So a lot happening within that. One last question to you is the scenario where even Janet Yellen has come on and said, because this may make a difference, is that stablecoins need regulation. Maxine Waters, we just did a clip here recently of her saying with Patrick McHenry, we might see a stablecoin regulatory framework come out. Would that make a difference, in your opinion, to kind of set at least the groundwork going forward for blockchain innovation and obviously the crypto markets?
I think it would be a good step forward. I think there is some possibility that could happen, that you get enough bipartisan support for regulation of stable coins and what kind of reserves they should have and how they should be able to attest to those reserves. That's just common sense regulation that everybody could get behind. We don't want stable coins that don't actually have the reserves to back the coins that they're minting. We don't want fraud in crypto. Nobody wants that. And by the way, there's a lot of fraud in crypto. And Gary Gensler is now obviously overreacting because he missed the FTX thing. He met with Sam Bankman-Fried numerous times, and Sam Bankman-Fried had registered entities with the SEC. People don't understand that. The SEC had authority to examine the operations of FTX, and they missed one of the biggest Ponzi schemes of all time. And so now we have overcorrection to, hey, let's get rid of crypto entirely. Well, I'm in favor of getting rid of the frauds. And so having a stablecoin bill is a great idea. I think there should be rock solid reserves behind stablecoins. And if we can prove that this government that we have can act together in a bipartisan way to do something smart, that would be a good precedent to tackle the bigger issue of what should the entire digital asset ecosystem regulatory environment look like. Yeah, for sure. James Murphy, always good to have you on the show, breaking down, giving some insights here, I think, and dropping some great knowledge on our audience. So we appreciate your time today. Thanks so much. Thank you, Paul. Always a pleasure being on with you. You bet. All right. So here we go, guys. This is a big one. You obviously now understand that the crypto army, whether it's Senator Warren and many others out there that have intent to go one direction. You, on the other hand, have intent to go another direction, and that's personal freedom, the ability to invest in things, be able to do and make your own decisions on how you want to deploy your capital. And I think this works in a lot of different markets out there. And I think now we're starting to see that maybe for the very first time playing out on a national stage in what could be the biggest election of our lifetime. That's right, of our lifetime, coming up in 2024. So a lot happening right now. We'll continue to drive in a lot of additional content for you guys and give you guys all the latest on this. Make sure and jump in on the Diamond Circle. It's a very easy way to stay connected. And of course, get connected to our additional content just by joining with the link down below. Of course, if you want to catch me, it is out there on Twitter @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here
on TechPath.